is these nationals. I believe they're Russian nationals. I don't know if they're naturalized into Americans. Regardless, the only thing that Abrams and company did that they were charged with, their crime, their alleged crime, they were throwing leaflets out of a building. And one of those leaflets were written in Yiddish. So they just threw two pieces of paper out of a building in New York City. These are young adults, Jacob Abrams, 4 other Russian nationals protesting U.S. actions in Russia. The 2 leaflets were printed, thrown out of a New York City building, and it said, "Workers in munitions factories, strike! Sincerely revolutionist." They didn't like that the United States government was interfering with the Russian Revolution. We were fighting Germany at the time, so really we didn't have any justification to interfere with the Russian Revolution. Abrams and the 4 Russians were sentenced to 15 to 25 years in prison, and then they were deported. 15 to 25 years in prison, and then they were deported. Why just deport them right then? Why would you want to pay for them to be in prison? Like, in 15 to 25 years for throwing a piece of paper out of a window? Supreme Court is going to uphold this conviction. This is the famous 1919 Abrams v. U.S. case. And the jury had to find out the question, did these individuals, Abrams and these 4 other Russian nationals, did they have the specific intent to cause insubordination in the armed forces? That's the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. And so this is the Woodrow Wilson chilling of freedom of speech. So that said, okay, you need to, the workers in the munitions factories, the factories producing the weapons, the guns, the planes, the tanks, strike. Stop working, because this rebellion in Russia is a good thing because it's for the working class, and we support it, and we don't support the United States interfering with it, which is the correct interpretation. That is Russian affairs, and just because their economic system is different than ours. So they were correct in their analysis. The war was against Germany specifically, so you had to, stretch the legality of that invasion. Well, yeah, the Russians are supporting the Germans, maybe. Who knows? So the Espionage Act was pretty intense. Woodrow Wilson, 1917. There was the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act, and they combined. The Sedition Act were amendments to the Espionage Act that were passed. Later on, Woodrow Wilson's going to exclaim, "No, you must stifle free speech," and they kind of were like, "Oh, you can't really do it outright, but no, you must." And so they kind of took out one of the real strongest provisions, but it's pretty strong on its face, right? Woodrow Wilson is an authoritarian, just like worse than Castro. He's going to throw his political prisoners. He's going to throw Eugene Debs in jail for giving a speech, and he's going to throw Abrams and these 4 Russian nationals in the prison for 20 years and then deported. And a lot of people are going to get fucked over. Emma Goldman and Wild Bill Haywood and Charles Schenck, Robert Goldman, Abrams, Robert Goldstein for making a movie about the American Revolution, but he made the British in a negative light, and we were at war with Germany, and Britain was our ally, and we weren't even allowed to make our allies at that time look bad in the past, even if history said that that was the case. And he was one of the people that worked on the cinematography of The Birth of a Nation, so fantastic that, not great, but terrible, just very awfully fantastic, that Woodrow Wilson would look at The Birth of a Nation and say that's like writing history with lightning, and then look at the spirit of 1776, the American Revolution, and say that that's seditious. And Robert Goldstein's going to go to jail. So Woodrow Wilson's 1917 Espionage Act is disgusting. It's authoritarian. He comes up with the domestic surveillance and a whole bunch of crazy-ass shit. You couldn't even utter the minuscule microscopic modicum of dissent against that stupid fucking World War I. World War I was bullshit. And the Espionage Act, was one of the reasons it was bullshit. If the draft is bullshit, if the war is worthy of fighting, people will volunteer. So fuck Woodrow Wilson, fuck World War I, fuck the draft, fuck the Espionage Act, and fuck the Sedition Act, and then fuck the Supreme Court for making this shitty-ass decision with Abrams and company. They're radicals, rebels, some were anarchists, they're socialists, another one was a revolutionary. Who gives a shit what they consider themselves? The leaflet had words that were, there's more words that were written. It was, okay, President Woodrow Wilson, His Majesty, the Queen of England, the Kaiser, total coward, and a turd nugget. Woodrow Wilson's a plutocrat. He hates the Russian Revolution because it gives the power to the people. And Woodrow Wilson and his plutocrat buddies don't want the people to have the power. Workers of the world, awake, rise up, strike down your enemy and mine. The one enemy of the workers of the world is capitalism. Woodrow Wilson and his barbaric invasion of Russia is to crush us, the workers of the world. We must have a general strike. We must stop producing all these bullets and guns and weapons. Solidarity now. Sincerely, the rebels. It also said, it's absurd to call us pro-German. We hate and despise German militarism more than American tyrants because Russia has been attacked by Germany before, more so than that turd Woodrow Wilson has ever had to endure. So they're not in favor of Germany, but they're in favor of the Russian Revolution. The one line that went too far, if they use arms against the Russian people to enforce their standard of order, so we will use arms, and they shall never see the ruin of the revolution, of the Russian Revolution, ever again. 4 charges of the Espionage Act were put on Abrams and the 4 Russians. Chief Justice Clark wanted the Russians to know that we don't have a spirit of revolution here in America, and then use the bullshit clear and present danger standards set by Oliver Wendell Holmes in the Schenck decision, and found that Abrams and the 4 Russians were guilty, deserving of 25 years of hard prison time and deportation. But Oliver Wendell Holmes, the author of the clear and present danger standards, set just 3 months prior, and Chief Louis Brandeis are going to give a dissent, and their dissent is striking. Holmes said that the 2 leaflets were just the silly actions of a silly goose of a man. Abrams and company didn't obstruct the military draft. There is no clear and present danger. In the Abrams case, according to Holmes and Brandeis, it was different than Schenck. Abrams' defendants lacked a specific intent to interfere with the war against Germany. As the statute was written, Abrams didn't care about the war with Germany. They hated Germany. The U.S. involvement they disagreed with was with the Russian revolutionaries. Holmes said that Abrams and the 4 other Russians posed no actual risk to anybody. Holmes said draconian sentence imposed showed that they're being prosecuted not for their dangerousness, but for their thoughts, for their beliefs, not their dangerous attempts at engaging and overthrowing the government and engaging in illegal anti-war speech. They were objecting to the U.S. intervention in the Russian Civil War. What the fuck has that got to do with Germany? Holmes said that the First Amendment allowed the people to disagree with the government and their objectives. Speech shouldn't be curtailed unless there's a present danger of immediate evil or the defendant intends to create such a danger. 2 leaflets do not rise to the level of evil or danger. There's no clear and present danger here whatsoever. And then that's when he's going to write his famous The Marketplace of Ideas. The ultimate good is the ultimate good desired is better reached by the free trade in ideas. The best test of truth is the power of the thought to get it itself accepted in the competition of the market, and that truth is the only ground upon which their wishes safely can be carried out. In the great pool of ideas, the ideas themselves should just win over by their logic and their reason and because they make sense. In the free trade of ideas and the competition and the great pool of ideas and the great market of ideas, the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market, and then to win. So that's how truth wins, by a free exchange of ideas. That's what he believes the theory of the Constitution is, and that's going to carry on for duration. I think Brandeis is going to say that it's good for a democracy, which, That was groundbreaking. But for right now, they're saying the reason we have free speech is so we, disagree and debate. It's okay to disagree. There's no problem with disagreeing. The problem is when, this Abrams bullshit happens. So 7-2, but James Oliver Wendell Holmes is going to be against his own clear and present danger standard. So, I don't know, maybe he evolved and, checked himself. Maybe there is a consistency to the whole thing. But ultimately, the Abrams decision is crap law. The Abrams decision is a total crap law. The only thing that's relevant about it is Oliver Wendell Holmes' dissent, which contradicts his shink, and a lot of shit contradicts shink, and so that gets shink thrown out. Brandenburg is the prevailing standard. Brandenburg, I think, has a 3-prong test. I like the organization, the clarity of a 2-prong and a 3-prong test. So, when it comes to this case, he was totally against it. He said they had as much right to publish the 2 leaflets that the government has to publish the Constitution of the United States, now vainly invoked by them. He says this is ridiculous. What the fuck are we doing? Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, and the defendants were deprived of their rights under the Constitution of the United States of America. So that's what he's saying. The free market of ideas, they're allowed to disagree. They're allowed to have a leaflet and throw it out the window. That does not warrant 20 years in prison and then deportation. And that's insanity. That is, that is so fucking gross and disgusting. To think that you're a Russian in America, New York City, you wrote something on a piece of paper, and now you're getting, prison time. Like, why imprison someone for 20, just deport, you don't want them, just get them out, right? Just get them out of here. But to put them in prison for 20, now we're going to pay for them, and, before they're out there on their own, but now we're paying for them and their clothing and their stay for 20 years and then deporting them afterwards. And for what? Just, the 2 leaflets, it was 2 versions, so I think they printed up like 1,000 leaflets. So it wasn't like just 2 leaflets out the window. It was like 1,000 leaflets, but 2 versions. One was in Yiddish and one was in English. And I don't know if they threw it all out and then it's just all flapping in the wind and shit. But that's a fantastic way to distribute, your ideas. And then wherever the pieces of paper may go, people, some random person picks it up. And frankly, I would think that most people would dismiss it. And even if they agreed with the sentiment, it's not like, oh my God, this paper is freaking genius. I'm going to go like we're just robots as soon as anybody picks up a piece of paper. And they agree with the premise, and that means they're just going to execute the conclusion. That's ridiculous. Oliver Wendell Holmes in the 1919 Abrams case, he's right. He's right. We got to stay eternally vigilant against attempts to check the expression of opinions that we loathe. So we got to protect unpopular speech, even if we don't believe to be fraught with death, unless they so imminently threaten immediate interference with the lawful and pressing. So fraught with death. The expression of opinions we loathe and are fraught with death. So you think about Chuck Schumer. I mean, Chuck Schumer didn't try to get the armed forces, an armed insurrection, the armed forces to overthrow the government. All Chuck Schumer said is that the Supreme Court is going to reap the whirlwind, and that there's a price to pay for them to robbing the rights of women. There's a price to pay. They're going to reap the whirlwind, and they're not going to know what hit them. They're not going to know what hit them. And I think that's probably what, freaked out the Supreme Court Justice, hit. Because it's just a little 3-letter word, but it's just, hit is, pop in the face, right? Bump in the nose. Hit could just be body check. Ooh, and then he hit him. So, hit. So I think that's what hit him. The word hit. John Roberts, was like, and he's not going to know what hit him. But did Chuck Schumer have, in any possibility, was there any possibility of him attacking the Supreme Court justices or getting the supporters to go and, carry out that, flippant sort of private sentiment? He never ordered, he didn't say he wanted it done, and he just said he's not going to know what hit him. And so it's hella rhetoric, but Chuck Schumer is going to explain later on that he was threatening political repercussions against the executive and the legislative branch, not even the judicial branch. Now, I'll say one last thing about threats I think it's everything about Abrams' 1919 decision. 3 months later, reverse course, marketplace of ideas. Yeah, so that's Abrams v. U.S. It might be consistent with Schenck, but since we were at Brandenburg and the 1931 Near decision, those are much better and clearer cut and more advanced thinking too. This is Woodrow Wilson, the Espionage Act. They don't know what the fuck they were thinking back then. They were just fucking stupid. They were just authoritarian, fascist pieces of shit. World War I was a bitch for the domestic situation in this nation. So I want to, one more time, go through the Chuck Schumer thing. I want to mention this thing that Scalia had said with the 1992 RAV v. St. Paul case. So he said 3 things about threats. So he was saying that you're not allowed to threaten people. You can't, verbal or written, you can't threaten people because you got to protect the individuals from the fear of violence and the disruption that the fear of violence would, therefore bring about, and the possibility that the threatened violence will occur. So a threat, you have to take a threat serious. 1992 RAV v. St. Paul. This is a crazy-ass case, which starts out with the guy, the defendant, making a cross and then going to a black family's yard and putting it in the yard and setting it on fire, just like the Ku Klux Klan had been doing for centuries, to terrorize and to intimidate. Now, that was the action that was done, and then it's going to bring up some hate crime or bias ordinance, some kind of anti-bias ordinance that they're going to strike down the anti-bias ordinance, but they're not really saying, anything about that specific crime, just that you could charge them with terrorism and some other shit without throwing, free speech in the trash. What I thought was significant about that was that Scalia says you can't threaten people. That's a limit to your First Amendment. Since you cannot threaten people, what did Chuck Schumer say? He says, John Roberts isn't going to know what hit him. He's going to have to reap the whirlwind, and there's a price to pay. Now, you could assume it's political. You could assume really anything. It was ambiguous. And so it wasn't a crystal clear threat. John Roberts isn't going to know what hit him. Is it dangerous? Is it around the corner? If you dwell, if you just dwell on it and just, it's like, did he mean it or didn't he mean it? He's saying this out loud. This is, oh boy, I don't like this. And so I just wanted to mention that because you cannot threaten anybody. So it's illegal to threaten. So did Chuck Schumer threaten him? You're not going to know what hit him. I think it's ambiguous, so it's not crystal clear. And I would assume he meant some political thing, legislation, packing the courts, and, some justices to the thing so that there's more liberals on the court and therefore overturning the majority. So, political consequences, but Chuck Schumer said it had nothing to do with the Supreme Court. It had to do with Trump and the Republican Senate because the newly appointed Supreme Court justices are the one that's overturned it. So he's not blaming the 2 that's going to do it. He's blaming, since they're brand new, basically the Republican Party and the president. So it had nothing, according to Chuck Schumer, right? So I feel like that actually kind of, it kind of bookends, it kind of caps, because he's going to walk it back and say that my words got mixed up, you guys are messing it up. You are thinking I said something else, but this is what I'm actually saying. So since it was ambiguous, he followed it up with some clarifying comments. And it wasn't a specific threat or a specific time. It was at no point in time did it even seem like Chuck Schumer was going to go knock on the door of John Roberts' office or go to his, house and set his trash can on fire. There's no intent whatsoever of any kind of physical violence at all, except for an imagination of John Roberts. And so, yeah, I wanted to mention that because if you do the 2- and 3-prong test of the Near v. Minnesota and the Brandenburg v. Ohio case, 1969, both of those cases say that Chuck Schumer is not guilty. In Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969, you have to pass the imminent lawless action test. So did the words say that there is imminent lawless action? Brandenburg v. Ohio quickly Just a quick background to the thing. I think it's Clarence Brandenburg. He's a Ku Klux Klan racist piece of shit, having a Ku Klux Klan rally, threatening black people, threatening Jewish people, threatening the government. None of these people are there on the private farm where the TV station were recording them, and so therefore there is no imminent lawless action about to take place. Brandenburg is free and clear, and it's going to change the test for free speech from here on out. The two-pronged test is it speech that's directed at inciting or at producing imminent lawless action, and is it likely to incite or produce that action? So even if a person stood up and said, okay, everybody, let's burn down this town, let's burn down this barn, let's burn down this mountain, I don't know, just whatever, just because somebody comes out and suggests it, inciting the thing, now the question is it likely to incite or produce such an action? For the Brandenburg, they're on a private farm. The TV station is going to show it several days later, so at the time, there was no black folks or Jewish people or government officials, so it was just a bunch of drunken white supremacists talking a bunch of shit on a private farm. And while you might, think that's horrendous, it protects radicals like communists and socialists and anarchists and the Black Panthers. It protects a lot of left radicals because the argument, like the Dennis decision and Whitney decision, was that communism, since Lenin and Stalin and Marx and Lenin and who the fuck ever, whoever, the enemies of socialism want to define communism as the inherent overthrow of a government. Therefore, if you're a communist, therefore you want to overthrow the government, you need to go to jail. So it protects the communists and socialists and anarchists and the Black Panthers, to where if, say the ideology of the Black Panthers was to have white genocide, well, according to Brandenburg, they're talking about, anti-Semitism, bad about the Jews, so genocide of Jews, genocide of black folks, and then they're going to have revengeance on the Supreme Court and the President and the legislature. So all three branches, they're going to have revengeance on all three branches. So they declared some kind of overthrow of government and declared their genocide, or maybe, ideology, their intentions, their fundamental core values of genocide of black people and Jewish folks. So if the Black Panthers, if they try to say that, well, the founder just wants white genocide, then that is not a threat, and that is, the First Amendment protects their right to exist and to speak and to, just live their life, man, and just be free. So, Chuck Schumer, you're going to reap the whirlwind. You're not going to know what hit you. It's ambiguous, but I think it's, intensely ambiguous. And if you know politics, I feel like you should just understand that. Chuck Schumer is just kind of a wimp of a man. And for John Roberts, I feel like, a hit dog is hollering. And so John Roberts was like, hey, Chuck, you need to watch that mouth. Do we need to take that? We need to wash your mouth out with soap, Chuck Schumer? And so John Roberts is kind of saying he was a little bit nervous about what he had said, and he's not going to be intimidated. But I think by saying, hey, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not afraid, okay? So I feel like, they should just let this lie, because the Neer decision, 1931 Neer v. Minnesota, is that you can't have prior restraints. You can't tell people not to publish certain material except if it reveals crucial military information, so where the military is moving. When the Navy, undocks or is about to go into another country, you can't reveal, crucial military information or obscenity, or if it directly incites act of violence. Again, Brandenburg says no for the third prong, obscenity. Is it obscene? You might be able to try to make some kind of argument that, it's obscene to, talk so bad about the Supreme Court justice. How obscene. Reap the whirlwind, you're going to make them pay the price, and they're not even going to know what hit them. You're not even going to know what hit you. What was it, a fist? A water balloon? What are you saying? You're going to hit me? You want to hit me? Come on, motherfucker. Come on, let's go. You want to hit? Is that what you're trying to... No, hold on. Chuck Schumer, be very crystal clear. We're not going to know what hit me. What isn't going to hit? What's going to hit me? You tell me. So, obscenity, no, it's not obscene. It goes to the inciting acts of violence. That's the prong that you would go, not crucial military information, not obscenity, and may directly, incite acts of violence. Douglas, in the Brandenburg decision, he gave this sentence. It was a concurrence, which actually dissented. Both Hugo Black and Justice Douglas. I don't know if it was the same one or if they both wrote separate ones. But basically, I'm going to get them confused. But Douglas, I believe, said this: the seriousness of the threat should be measured by the actions taken to further the belief, rather than the nature of the belief itself. So for Douglas and Hugo Black, they were almost absolutionists because they said that the phrase "no law" in the First Amendment needed to be interpreted literally. So they were strict constructionalists. They say they're fundamentalists. The Constitution is written this way. It says no law in the First Amendment, therefore no law can be passed. It doesn't mean a little law, big law, blue law, green law, no red law, no black or white law, no little law, big middle, no fucking law can be passed to abridge the freedom of speech. No law can be passed to abridge the freedom of speech. So for Douglas, he feels like the belief itself. So go back to Black Panthers wanting to genocide white. That's a theory. That's a hypothetical. And maybe some of them did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. But it doesn't. I'm not actually making a comment on the Black Panthers. Let's just make it a Black KKK. Let's assume there's a Black KKK, not the Black Panthers. So they want white genocide, and that's like in their bylaws, and they just really hate white people just so much to their very core. Douglas says that the seriousness of the threat should be measured by the actions that are taken to further the belief, rather than just the nature of the belief itself. And so if the Black KKK wants to genocide the entire white race, okay, that's their belief. Disgusting, awful, terrible belief. They're allowed to have it, according to American jurisprudence, unless they start to make actions which seems like they're about to start, carrying out their white race genocide. They're about to throw the white people into, some sort of trash compactor or some log tree trimming, whatever. So anyways, three-prong test, Neer v. Minnesota, Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969. Both of these cases say Chuck Schumer not guilty at all. And nobody's going. Chuck isn't going to hit anybody, and nobody that listened to Chuck is going to attack anybody. There is no threat of any kind of physical violence whatsoever. At all. So the belief itself, even if Chuck Schumer believed that the Supreme Court justice needed to be attacked, that would be okay. He could speak it and say it out loud, but unless he takes actions to further that belief, then it's protected speech, according to Douglas. And Hugo Black's concurrence, which was actually a dissent in Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969, imminent lawless action. So yeah, that's the 1919 Abrams case. Peace.